Thanks everyone. If I could have you all take your seats. Please remember to switch your electronic devices to silent this evening. Welcome everybody. I'd also like to welcome the viewers who are at home watching the meeting via the live stream. Tonight's meeting is being held both in person and via Zoom. We have a large number of elected members and staff who are unable to attend tonight's meeting in person due to COVID-19. Please be patient if any technical difficulties arise, and they will be dealt with as quickly as possible. If you wish to speak on an item, please raise your hand so that it can be clearly seen. And when it's time to vote on an item, please keep your hand raised until your vote has been confirmed. I'll now move to the opening prayer. Councillor Proud, could you please read the opening prayer? And I ask you all to be upstanding. Thanks.
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions, to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask this in your name.
Amen.
Amen.
Councillor Sargent, could you please read out the Acknowledgement of Country?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect to the elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you. You can take your seat, thanks. Without prior approval, any recording of this meeting is prohibited. No action should be taken on any resolution of council prior to written advice from the council being received. That brings us to item 1, which is the official opening. Ladies and gentlemen, I declare the council meeting of the 24th of May 2022 open at 6:30 p.m. Attendance and apologies. I have an apology from the CEO, Mr. Stuart Jardine, and from Director of Corporate Services, Ingrid Hawkins. Please note that tonight we have several councillors who are on Zoom. So on Zoom this evening, we have Councillor Andrea Criado, Councillor Joe Ferrante, Councillor Chris Hatton, Councillor David Lagan, Councillor Suzanne Migdale, Councillor Teresa Olo, Councillor Bianca Soundry, Councillor Lisa Thornton, and the rest of the council are in chambers. And I thank those councillors for being in attendance. I know whilst they are on Zoom, some of them aren't feeling 100%, so I appreciate their attendance to make this meeting possible. Item 3, approved leave of absence. I have nil. Item 4, disclosure of interest. Disclosures from the Community and Resource Committee meeting can be found in the agenda of tonight's meeting and are displayed on the screen behind me. For the council meeting this evening, Councillor David Lagan disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.2 TE2 as he has met with senior staff at the pool to view indoor upgrades work and outdoor infrastructure issues. Councillors, are there any other disclosure of interests that haven't already been made? No indication. I'll move on to item 5, which is petitions. Item 5.1, an e-petition on DA 212145, objection to the proposed viewing towers on Burrows Road opposite residential homes. Councillor Kristovich, would you like to table this petition, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The following e-petition containing 219 verified signatures and a hard copy version containing a further 16 verified signatures has been received by the City, and it reads, we the undersigned do respectively request that the City refuse the proposed DA 21/2145 for the following reasons. The height and scale is not appropriate as it far exceeds the City of Stirling scheme's 2 and 3 stories, overlooking loss of privacy for local residents, negative visual impact and loss of amenity, an impact on surrounding properties, property value, generation of more pollution, noise and disturbance for the residents in the surrounding streets, visual bulk of the tower and failure to comply with the existing streetscape and neighbouring properties, how will the children and people with disabilities be accommodated, and it lists a whole range of other reasons as well, Mr. Mayor, but I won't go through all of them, but you get the gist of it.
Thank you very much. 5.2, petition, disabled access ramp at Medham's Pool. Councillor Farrelly, would you like to table the petition, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The following petition contains 100 verified signatures and has been received by the City. We, the undersigned, respectfully request and urge the City of Stirling to consider the urgency and act now on a solution since the disabled access ramp has been removed at Medham's Pool. The reason seasonal exposure of jagged rocks makes it far too dangerous and safe for us, the community members, especially the elderly, disabled and children, wanting to enter and exit the water to continue enjoying swimming and snorkelling. We thank you for your cooperation. Look forward to a speedy resolution. That's the first one.
Thank you. And I believe you have another unverified petition you'd like to present.
Unverified 40 think I said 46 signatures, and it is in regard to a petition for establishment of crosswalks on Davenport Street, Burrows Road and Francis Avenue, Karrinyup, and to be supported by a 40km/h zone, and also additionally speed humps should be considered to slow down the Hoon traffic. And there's quite an involved amount of words, but I think that gives you the gist of it.
Thank you. Was that all? Yes? Is there any other councillors who have... Councillor Ree?
Yes, thank you. I have a petition, please, with regard to the childcare premises, excuse me, proposed at lot 31, Lake Street, Woodlands. It's the petition from 73 unverified signatures. They object to the childcare centre on League Street and Woodlands because the single lane each way, east and west, bus stops within 50 metres holding up traffic to drop off and pick up passengers, slow moving rubbish pickup trucks stopping frequently, slow moving recycle pickup trucks stopping frequently, slow moving green waste pickup stopping frequently. All of the above occurring at separate times during the day. The potential of 100 cars plus entering in either direction morning and afternoon on Lee Street with backup cars waiting to get access to premises. The high level of child-staff ratio with insufficient car parking bays for them. There is no on-street parking available. Talbot Road being opposite proposed development is already a hazardous road due to cars parked on both sides with very acute bend on the road 100 metres from League Street. It is and has always been a difficult to turn right onto League Street with a constant flow of traffic caused by green turning left on Pearson Street. Green light, I think that should be. It is the same trying to turn left into League Street due to constant stream of traffic in the opposite direction. Dropping off children at a daycare centre takes a lot of time, settling them in and before and after being left. There is nowhere for build-up of traffic to go. There is no off-street parking. Potentially drivers may be tempted to park in Talbot Road and use public transport to the Stirling station or the city. We believe, and this is mainly from the residents at Parkland Villas in Woodlands, which as you know are over 55, but their average age is over 55. We believe this proposed development is not suitable to the area considering the restricted access on the main road and in particular the congestion on Talbot Road where there is already parking on both sides causing a very narrow access to League Street.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other unverified petitions? If not, if I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ree moving it. Councillor Perkov has seconded it. I will put that to the vote to accept the petitions. Show of hands, councillors at home as well. Thank you. That is unanimous. Item 6 is responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice, and the public questions responses from the last council meeting were published in the minutes of that meeting. Now brings us to item 7, which is public question time. We've received some questions for tonight's meeting, and I'll start with those. And I'll invite Monica Jarrett, if you'd like to come forward, please. If you can just turn the microphone on to start and just state your name and then your questions, please.
Yes, Monica Jarrett from Karrinyup. I'll provide photographs to all the members explaining what I'm going to ask. My first question is, the signs erected at the exit and entry points at the Karrinyup Shopping Centre on Davenport Street make it extremely difficult to safely exit the shopping centre as they obstruct the view to the right, and this obstruction is compounded by the cars parked on the left. Can Council please direct that these parking signs be moved to a safe area so as not to obstruct vision for drivers exiting the car parks? Photographs have been provided to councillors and officers to illustrate this dangerous situation.
Yes, and thank you for sending those through. They have been seen by us all. Mr Roddick, can you provide a response, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question, Ms Jarrett, and thanks for providing those questions earlier. I've had a look at the signs you've identified. Now, the City have issued a temporary general permit for the wayfinding signage. That was subject to the removal and relocation of 3 signs. Now, 2 of those signs have been removed and relocated, and there is 1 still to be removed, which is your middle photo. I believe maybe the other 2 photos were older photos from Google. they have been relocated. So we assessed the obstruction lines and made sure that all those signs surrounding that site do meet engineering requirements. There were 3 that required to be relocated, and 2 have been. There's 1 still for that to be completed, and we hope that is done very soon.
Oh, good. So that the one that I showed the photo with the poor lady trying to lean forward, is that the one that's going to be moved?
The middle one is the one that still needs to be moved. The others have.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Further pictures to my question 2. The pictures and information relevant to my next question have been provided to councillors and officers. Why were developers, city, permitted to remove the green grass treescapes on Davenport Road and replace it with concrete footpaths hard up against the road? This does not fill local residents with any confidence regarding the zero setback redevelopment being suggested for the northern side of Davenport Road, which will similarly have no grassed areas or trees.
Thank you. Mr. Rodich.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Jarrett, those trees that you identified in the aerial image were largely located within the property boundary, so they were approved as part of the JDAP consideration of the redevelopment of the shopping centre in 2015. There were 2 trees, however, which were located on the verge, which were removed. In terms of your second question, those lots to the north of Davenport Street are still zoned residential R30. I'm aware that, and yourself alluded to, that we are looking at the planning framework for that area, and we haven't determined whether or not a zero setback is appropriate or not for that street at this point in time. But we would hope that, well, of course, any planning framework would ensure that verge trees are retained and would look to retaining as much vegetation on sites, but we haven't determined what that setback along Davenport Street will look like yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert Mitchell. Thank you. Your name and suburb, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor. Robert Mitchell, Karrinyup. Good evening, councillors and all the gallery. My first question relates to the Stirling Performing Arts Centre. Has the council progressed the establishment of a City Stirling Performing Arts Centre?
Mr. Quirk.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mitchell. As previously resolved by Council, the City is progressing a community infrastructure plan for the Stirling City Centre, and at Council's request, that does include a performing arts centre, as well as other higher order infrastructure that we think is appropriate for a city centre. So it is being progressed as part of a broader body of work, but given the implications, both financial in particular, related to infrastructure of this size, it is important that Council has appropriate information to decide whether it is a facility that the City should progress or not.
Mr. Mitchell?
This matter has been on the table for 12 months. Is there going to be a report?
That's been answered, Mr. Mitchell.
This financial year?
Not this financial year, but this calendar year.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Mitchell.
you can tell me...
Mr. Mitchell, your next question, please. It will be on this calendar year.
Yes, this relates to item 12.2-TE2, Terry Tyzack Aquatic Centre redevelopment, outdoor pool and plant. Yeah, now, following the calling of a public tender to carry out the items as listed there is A, B, C and D, upgrades and redevelopment to outdoor pool and plant as listed below in the document tonight. Has the Aquatic Centre established a geothermal compensatory heating to the pool system? Does the tender include such? If not, why?
No, it doesn't. So the tender allows for a new plant equipment in the plant room. There's not enough budget available for geothermal, but it is available to be able to put it on later. There was a lot of lobbying done at the federal election, but no funding came through for it. The pump is at end of life, so it does need to be done fairly urgently, but there is the ability to put the geothermal in and retrofit.
Now, my next question relates to the public tender declaration. Are the final bulk costs per tenderer going to be publicly given? You say here that it's all confidential.
Yes, I'll get, so the budget amount will be available, but for what part of what tender and who receives that tender, I don't know if they will. I'll get clarification. Mr. Blanchard?
Now, at the declaration of the tenders, all tenderers put in a bulk price, and is that going to be publicly?
So it will be at some stage, but I'll get Mr. Blanchard to clarify. There is an issue so one of the things that happens when a tender is approved by this council, if it's made public, then there's no ability for council to negotiate with tenderer or determine, sometimes contracts are dealt with afterwards. And in the past, when it's been announced who the tenderer is, council loses its ability to get the best bang for buck and get the right outcome from the tenderer. But I'll get Mr. Blanchard to clarify.
Under the Local
I'll
Government
just get
Act,
Mr. Blanchard to clarify.
under the Local Government Act, it
Mr.
says-
Mitchell, I'll just get Mr. Blanchard to clarify for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At completion of the tender, the successful tenderer amount will be uploaded to the city's tender register on the city's website.
I didn't quite catch that.
So the amount will be published on the website.
It will be published.
The successful
All the
tenderer.
tenderers and their prices.
No, I wouldn't think it'd be all the tenderers and their prices would be published.
It's a public tender, and it says that
Mr. Blanchard to give you an answer on that.
Thank you. It's only the price of the successful tenderer.
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Mitchell. Simon Stanton, please.
I have another question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell, you've had 3 questions.
I have not. I've had 2, as I quoted to you, Mayor. I said
Mr. Mitchell,
it was the Performing Arts Centre and the Aquatic Centre, Terry Tyzack Pool. And my next one...
I just need to clarify.
My next one...
Mr. Mitchell, just wait a second.
Related to the Protected Tree Register.
Mr. Mitchell, just wait a
You've got
second.
a copy of it there, Mayor.
Can I get clarification? Has there been 3 questions?
Oh, my God.
Yes.
There have been, just so we're right though, there have been 3 questions. Mr. Mitchell, in the interest of protecting these young children at the front, I'll let you ask the 4 questions.
I have not, Mayor. Excuse me. I have only asked 2 questions
Just get on with it.
as I related to you, and it's recorded as such. Why can't I ask the one about the Protected Tree Register?
You may ask it. I just said you may ask it.
The item I gave you. Item 3.
Let's get on with it, Mr. Mitchell.
Beg your pardon?
Let's get on with it, Mr. Mitchell. The question,
Right.
please.
Yes. Yeah, I wish to ask that the Protected Tree Register be also conveyed onto the park and reserves within the City of Stirling. Is that going to take place?
Mr. Kellett?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the question. The Protected Trees Register applies to non-city managed lands, that is private trees on private property. So the city manages approximately 300,000 trees across 500 parks and reserves and a further 103,000 street trees on road reservations. The city manages these green assets according to contemporary arboricultural practices and standards requiring more complex data capture than that proposed in the Protected Tree Register. Requests for any further trees, shrubs to the specific road reservations can be made to the city, and these will be considered on a site-by-site basis. The 2022 planting season has commenced and approximately 8,000 trees are scheduled for planting, along with a further 60,000 shrubs and ground covers planted on city land.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
That means that the trees on parks are going to be registered.
No.
Is that correct?
No, that is not correct.
Well, I live in a cul-de-sac.
Mr. Mitchell, it's not open for debate. I'm happy to provide you a full response to that in writing.
Yeah, well, I've got 3 trees out the front of my park, over 100 years old, and they're not protected. And you're asking every private property in Stirling to have,
Thanks, Mr.
have
Mitchell.
it on the register.
Simon Stanton, please.
You're pathetic.
Mr. Mitchell. Just put your microphone back on, please.
Is that on now?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So my name is Simon Stanton. I live in the suburb of Corrine, and more importantly, I'm here feeling very privileged and honoured and quite moved to represent the Sea of Blue and Black Corrine members behind me. Mr. Mayor, I've got 3 questions tonight in regard to item 17.1, which is the new clubhouse project for the Corrine Baseball Club. I stood here 2 months ago and gave a deputation speech, and I know a lot of work's been done, and tonight the matter's behind closed doors. But 3 questions. The first one, Mr. Mayor, could tonight's discussion please record our club's appreciation of certainly your support, as well as that of our councillors and the staff and the executive of the City of Stirling for a project which in so many ways defines the future of the Corrine Gats Ball Club.
Thank you. Yes, it can.
Question number 2. Are councillors aware that a decision to proceed with this project is needed to provide safe toilet and change facilities, secure storage and social amenities for male and females, young and old?
Thank you, Mr. Stanton, and obviously that item is on a confidential report for council to decide this evening, and they have been provided that information.
Thank you. And then question 3 is, are councillors aware that a decision to not proceed will be devastating to our club, as it will make it almost impossible to continue to grow the sport of baseball in the Corrine area?
Thank you, Mr. Stanton, and I'll certainly take that into consideration when deciding tonight.
Thank you.
Charlotte Smart-Kelly. Thank you. Just your name and suburb, please.
Charlotte Smart-Kelly. I live in the suburb of Innaloo. And as I pull my questions up, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Whadjuk Noongar people. Okay, question 1. The women's public toilets available at Birrelly Park are currently missing a toilet roll dispenser in one of the cubicles, but more importantly, I've noted that the Sharps disposal unit has been removed and replaced with soap dispenser. I've got nothing against soap or anything like that, but I would like to note that the men's facilities still have the Sharps disposal unit. When can we expect these 2 amenities to be restored, most importantly? And why was the Sharps disposal removed in the first place?
Thank you. Mr. Kellick, do you have a response?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. So my understanding is that the Sharps container will actually be reinstalled tomorrow. So I don't have an answer for why it was taken out. It may have just been vandalised and removed, damaged to be replaced. And we've also reported the missing toilet roll paper dispenser, so that'll follow soon after the Sharps container.
Marvellous. My second question is that I've noticed a lot of nitrous oxide canisters, otherwise known as nangs or bulbs or whippets or whatever you want to call them, littered around the Innaloo neighbourhood. The little silver canisters, you know what I'm talking about. So as a compressed gas, these canisters cannot be disposed of in litter bins as per the Waste Management Local Law 3.11A3, because they are combustible, like they're on par with an oxygen container. So would the city consider having more publicly available and widespread waste receptacles for compressed gas containers, including but not limited to recreational nitrous oxide canisters, but also other household aerosols such as deodorant cans?
Thank you. Mr. Kellick, are you able to provide a response to that? Or Mr. Quirk?
Thank you for the question. Specifically around the empty canisters that we do see unfortunately littered around the city, they are non-flammable and empty after they're used, obviously. So they are actually able to be put into our standard city bins. Having said that, our experience is obviously the people who are using those for hallucinogenic purposes aren't using any bins, and they're simply dumping them anyway. So certainly the availability of bins for flammable containers is something the city can at least consider, but it won't be in direct response to the NANGS issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know they're not flammable, but they are combustible, so they could potentially ignite. My third question, and there's a bit of a preamble here, is that I found the conduct of various councillors at the meeting on the 10th of May regarding the debacle about the name change of the City of Stirling, which I'm not going to get into, and the talk of consultation with the Aboriginal community left me feeling a little incredulous that both sides of the debate spoke in a manner that I did not feel reflected the values of the City of Stirling as I understand them. Now, I've had the privilege of being under the tutelage of some of the most respected Aboriginal academics at the University of Western Australia, and I raised this issue under the advice and encouragement of one of my current unit coordinators, that I found the use of the term Aboriginals as a noun to be not only incorrect but also disrespectful when the preferred term is Aboriginal people or peoples or Aboriginal community. It's an adjective, not a noun. So I guess my questions are here is that does the City of Stirling undertake cultural competency training, and who or where is the Aboriginal voice on council?
Thank you very much for that question. Look, I can't disagree with you. There's some parts of that debate that weren't, I don't think, respectful or possibly reflecting the values of the city. And I'm sure you can, I'd encourage you to let those councillors know that if you thought that. In terms of using it as a plural, apologies on behalf of council. I'm sure some of that would be a misunderstanding, and we'll certainly take your comments on board. Council does undergo cultural awareness training, and council will certainly take that on board and make sure we're better educated in that form. In terms of Aboriginal representation on this council, that's a matter for the electors of the City of Stirling.
Okay. Marvellous. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Rees Barrett. And before I go to the next one, 15 minutes has passed, so I will extend question time. We only have 3 left, so I'll ask Mr. Wheeler to come forward. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Your name and suburb?
Good evening, councillors, staff and gallery. My name's Simon Wheeler, Scarborough. I was really hoping you were going to say Nangs, but you didn't, did you?
The Nangs?
Yeah,
yes.
Good man, thank you. Mayor, last year rates were increased as per usual, but they were capped, as in we were guaranteed not to pay any more than the previous year's rates. I'm unsure, however, what the underlying rate increase was as a percentage for last year, and we're getting close to rates again this year. And I have two parts to my question. What was the actual underlying rate increase in the last financial year? And if rates go up by, say, 1% again this year, are we going to get hit with double bubble? We're going to have to pay both sets of rates all at once. You know, we're going to add the 2 percentages together.
No, so previously with the part of the COVID stimulus package, the rates were frozen so that no person paid more than they did the previous years. Underlying that, the GRV values had increased, so the rate in the dollar increased. This year it will be up to council through budget process if they increase rates, and they're currently going through the budget process. If they're increased by 1%, that would probably affect households in the order of $10 to $15 per household. Does that answer your question?
There's no carrying forward from last year?
No, I don't think there is. No.
Thank you.
So the rate doesn't go back to something higher and then get a 1%. It will be increased. Mr. Richards, would you like to? Maybe I should go to the finance expert instead of winging it.
Yeah, that's correct. Just for clarity, we actually froze the rates for the 2021 financial year, which was the year that COVID first struck. Last year we had a rate rise of 0.9% over 2 years because we effectively cut rates in the 21 financial year.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. You have to excuse me, Mayor Irwin. I think an idiot wrote my notes for tonight. Is the city aware of any impediment, legal or perhaps environmental, that precludes the approved development at the Carrunup Shopping Centre, DA 19/1906, from going ahead? That would stop the current approval from going ahead.
Mr. Rodich?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A quick one from me, Mr. Wheeler. No.
The city is not aware of any.
We're not aware. No.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I went, as you're aware, Mr. Mayor Owen, I went to the meeting with Blackburn at Karrinyup Community Centre last week, and there's a new DA, we're told, that's going to be put into the City of Stirling.
Yes.
And there's a petition being put in tonight regarding to the a viewing tower application. Now, that relates to DA 1906. Is that development application going to have to be resubmitted, given that that development's never going to be built?
I wouldn't think so, because it remains valid, but I'll get Mr. Rodich.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm correct. It remains valid, so that application is still live, Mr. Willer, and the city can still consider that viewing platform as proposed currently. The next application is still just at the start of assessment, and look, that doesn't preclude the city for dealing with this application for the viewing tower.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Peter Ellis, please. Mr. Ellis.
Peter Ellis in Corrine. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff and fellow ratepayers. Can you please advise how much funds our council is providing to the administration to employ another extra 300 employees from 1,098 employees to 1,400?
I don't know if that's entirely
Okay.
correct, but Mr. Richards, we might have to respond to you in writing. I'm guessing you're expecting that.
Fine.
Yes, our current FTE is around 1,100, so we'll have to respond to you in writing.
I'll have to find where I got the 1,400 from, won't I?
That could be that could be head count. Yeah.
Possible. How much has it cost this financial year to pay for a contractor to attend the Stirling Council CEO performance review to protect the CEO's interest from you nasty councillors?
I think it's prescribed under the Act that we actually do that. Mr. Blanchard, are you able to provide some advice?
Just the amount of money, yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, there is a requirement in the CEO's contract that there be an independent consultant to work with council and the CEO. The matters relating to how much they are paid were determined today at the CEO Performance Review Committee and will be available after those minutes are published.
So we will publish those. It's just because it's just been done, they can't be announced yet.
That's nice. May I refer to the response to question 1 of the council meeting of the 10th of May, where it appears the administration was not capable of producing the electors' meeting minutes with 42 hours of work time at 6 full days, even with plenty of notice when the council staff record the verbals from the council meeting, every council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Mr. Blanchard, I'm guessing they have a little bit of other things to do, but...
I hope it will be more than a guess, Mr. Mayor, that we have a little other things to do. Certainly, the electors' general meeting isn't undertaken in a vacuum. We still need to produce agendas for committee and council meetings and minutes for committee and council meetings at the same time as we work through the electors' general meeting.
That.
So
Yes. Okay. No. Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Ellis. Bruce Quayle. Thank you, Mr. Quayle. Just your name and suburb, please.
Bruce Quayle, Churchlands. Mr. Mayor, councillors. I'll speak on behalf of the residents of Churchlands Estate, and more specifically the residents of Hibiscus Court and the Grove cul-de-sacs within that estate. While we accept the parking restriction changes in Churchlands Avenue and the allocation of spaces in Memory Place has had a positive effect on the parking situation, we note with concern the report from Community and Resource Committee that recommends, and I'll summarise, that the city continues to monitor the parking issues and take the appropriate action as and when required. On the 13th of May, we wrote to the Mayor, Director of Infrastructure and Manager Engineering Services, raising our concerns on the return of students parking in Hibiscus Court, contrary to what was claimed in the report which was issued subsequently. We also advised of the observed vacant bays in Memory Place, which reinforces our claims that the students are parking in Hibiscus Court out of convenience and nothing else. Their convenience is impacting the accessibility to our own properties by ourselves and our service providers, notwithstanding the safety of pedestrians in our street. We continue to call for 1 hour parking restrictions in our cul-de-sacs. My questions are based on the report and the recommendation. Can we please be advised of specifically what instances will trigger the action as and when required that is referred to in the recommendation?
Thank you. I'll go straight to Mr. Guillemot for that one.
Thank you. Through the chair, I guess the reason we haven't been prescriptive is that with parking restrictions, it's not a black and white science. We'd obviously have to undertake regular patrols of the area and look at how many vehicles are parking, what times of the day they're parking, and how frequently they're parked during the course of the day. So that's why it's difficult to quantify, and why we've put as and when. But officers do have delegated authority to install restrictions as and when required, and that's what we've committed to doing if required.
I'm still not hearing what's going to trigger it though. How much congestion do we have to put up with before something is done?
Thank you, Mr. Quayle. And that item obviously is on the agenda this evening, and councillors have received your photos and your comments, and we'll take that under consideration.
Okay, thank you. Second question. Who will be making the call on that action to be taken?
I would think council will probably have a look at that tonight, and then we'll see from there.
Okay, third question. Are we to continue submitting photographs and recounts of issues arising in our street every time they occur? And if so, to whom should they be addressed?
I would continue. You've certainly been effective to date, Mr. Quayle.
Okay.
You seem to know the process well. I think all councillors have been receiving your photos and your emails, and it is important to keep us informed.
All right, so you want us to continue doing that, as long as the problem continues.
I'm going to regret saying this, but you're welcome to, Mr. Quayle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's all I have on my list. Is there anyone I've missed in question time? If not, I will move on. Item 8 is application for leave of absence. I have had one from Councillor Carlo Perkoff. He's requested a leave of absence from 25th of May 2022 to 6th of June 2022. Are there any other requests, councillors? Councillor Sandri? Councillor Sandri?
Thank you. Can I please request a leave of absence from the 8th of June through to the 23rd of June?
Yes, thank you. Anyone else? If not, I'll just need a mover and a seconder to approve those. Councillor Ree has moved. Councillor Olo has seconded. All those in favour, please. It's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Item 9 is confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I have a mover and a seconder to accept the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council of the 10th of May 2022? Moved Councillor Perkoff, seconded Councillor Farrelly. And a show of hands to accept those. Is that unanimous? Thank you, councillors. Announcements by the presiding member. Firstly, just a friendly reminder that the last council meeting, council resolved to bring forward the dates of the June Planning and Development Committee meeting and the council meeting. So the P&D meeting will be held on the 7th of June, Tuesday the 7th of June, and the council meeting the following week on the 14th of June 2022. I'd also just like to say a welcome. Obviously, we can see a sea of blue out there, and there's, as you heard from the question, there is an item on the agenda this evening. But I'd like to welcome the state representatives from the Kareen Cats Baseball Club. If they want to stand up, maybe we can recognise the state team there and the coach. Well done, guys. And I might just pause at that second, just make a note. Obviously, we appreciate you rolling up this evening and showing your support for an item that this council will consider. You are welcome to leave during the evening in the understanding that your item is actually a confidential tender item and you won't get to hear any of it. So I just don't want you to hang around till the end of the night and be disappointed. Thank you. That now takes us to item 11, which is unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. Item 12, reports and recommendations of committees. And we now move to the Audit Committee items. Councillors, do you wish to pull any of these items out? Councillor Ree? So this is Audit Committee meeting items. If it's confidential and you'd like to pull it out, I'm happy for you to pull it out and we'll deal with it in the confidential part of this meeting this evening.
Am I able to, through you, Mr Mayor, without saying numbers or anything, just reference to a question I asked about leave time and the number of employees that had to use their leave?
Yes.
Had to
So
had to
let's
take
pull it
that
out and we'll see. Yeah. I think if you pull it out, then we can deal with it. And if we haven't pulled any items out yet.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, but it's not asking numbers, so I don't know where you would like to. A1?
So IA1?
Yes, please.
Okay. So if it's just that one that's been pulled out, we will now deal with it. So I'll go to Councillor Lagan as the chair of the committee to item 12.1 IA1.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation as printed.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Kristovich. And then I don't think there's anyone opposed. Councillor Readers has a question. So let's go carefully with the question. Let's see how we go.
Thank you. Realising how hard it has been on some of the staff, well, actually all of the staff and everybody in Western Australia and the world with COVID, it's been a very tricky time that it's been well reported in the media that some people using all their sick leave, their annual leave to keep jobs open. We've had to try to keep jobs going. I thank Mr Ellis for keeping us informed of how many staff we have, and I'll be interested in that answer. But my question was, like, how many staff had sort of left because of redundancy or because of COVID, and I know it's been very high in the schools, and statistically I didn't get that. Plus the other question was regarding the number of people that have had to take leave without pay. And to me, that should have been easily done because it should just be a line on our expensive RMS system that we've got in here. So that was my point. It's been very talked about in the paper of people, businesses, and we are a business, balancing books.
So they're your questions, though?
Yeah, that's it.
So Mr Richards, are we able to provide an answer on those?
No, and I'll have to take that on notice and...
Or Ms Flynn may be able to provide some answers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I believe the Director of Corporate Services issued a memo answering the question that you had during Audit Committee regarding how many staff had to use up, after they had used up their leave, had to take unpaid leave because of COVID. And I don't think we can actually pull out from our system the instances of unpaid leave attributed to COVID. It's just noted as unpaid leave. And just noting that they have to utilise all of their other leave before they can take unpaid leave per our leave management practice.
Does that provide you the answer you need?
But I did ask also how many people actually left the city, whether it was because of, and I appreciate we can't really say for the COVID or whatever, but how many redundancies, because the Education Department's put out a thing about how many people left because they were over 60, they felt vulnerable, workplace, whatever. And I asked for that as well, just how many people actually have left the city through whatever reason.
Thank you. And we can... Okay, we'll follow up on that. I think we can take that offline and follow up on that, though. But it will be hard to compartmentalise why they've left, I would think. Yeah. Yeah. So in that case, I will put that item 12.1 IA1. There's no one opposed. Move Councillor Lagan, seconded Councillor Kristovich. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. And I'll now go to you, Councillor Lagan, for the balance of reports for the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the balance of the reports.
And a seconder for those, if we can, Councillor Perkov. And a show of hands, please. All those in favour? Thank you, and that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to the Community and Resource Committee items. Item 12.2 PS1 is required to be pulled out as it was referred to this meeting. Councillors, do you wish to pull any other items out? Councillor Proud.
Page 37, ES2.
Thank you. Any other items that you wish to pull out this evening? Councillor Sandri.
Item 12.2 TE2, the TTAC redevelopment.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I will note just with that item, the recommendation from committee is referred. So just if the chair can be mindful not to put the procedural first.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other items? Councillor Ree?
Yes, thank you. 12.2 GOV 1 on page 102.
Thank you. All right, and with that, I think that's us ready to go. So first one up is 12.2 ES2, the Churchlands Estate parking issues, pulled out by Councillor Proud. Councillor Sargent as chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Proud approached me earlier asking if she could move this recommendation, so I'll pass to her.
Thank you, Councillor Proud.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr.
Just a bit
Mayor.
louder, thanks.
That the city installs 1 hour restricted parking in Hibiscus Court and the Grove between 7:30 a.m. and 4:15 p.m. on school days, in line with the existing parking restrictions within the Churchlands estate.
Thank you. And is there a seconder for this? Councillor Ferrante.
And it was debatable whether to put that in
Is it-
as number 1 or number 2, or number 2 and number 1 with the existing
Sorry,
monitoring.
that's adding on to the existing. Yep. Councillor. Councillor Ferrante, are you happy with that? Yep.
So just for clarification, Mr. Mayor, I'm assuming that the original recommendation in the report will be number 1 and Councillor Proud's addition will be a number 2, yes?
Yep. So it was just a minor amendment to put the 1 hour parking that was talked about in the reports previously. While we're doing that, is there anyone opposed to this? Is it just a question? Yes? Let's get that done.
I'd like to know what the staff
Sure.
comment on that, please.
Mr. Guillemot?
Through the chair, the restrictions that are proposed are more preemptive, so it's not something that the city would normally do as a preemptive measure. But having said that, it's the restrictions that are proposed is something that we could certainly manage.
If these restrictions come in place, can it be brought back to council within some time frame?
And I get what you're asking, Councillor Rees. So,
Just
and I
address
guess
that.
the main question with this is, whilst the intent is quite clear, the fact that we continue to monitor parking issues associated with student parking, is it possible to incorporate that this 1 hour restricted parking is still part of that? That if it actually had, I think what some councillors are going to be concerned of is it's going to have other unintended consequences and flow on whilst we're still studying it. Councillor Proud?
I could add, Mr. Mayor, the city is continuing to monitor and has already the authority to do whatever in line with their monitoring.
Yep. Fair call. There will be anyway. So I think the intent with the monitoring is that if it needs to come back sooner rather than later, it will, but the city will continue to monitor it. So
the city's monitoring it, then we won't know whether this works or not. I mean, you've got to have in mind that we've had COVID and people not at school. So
I think it's quite clear that the appropriate action and when required will address those issues and it'll be reported to council.
I meant that if you're going to have the 1 hour restricted parking, how do we know that works? Can't we say that it's brought back to council, say in
But
November?
I think, so councillor, it's part of the same motion. So I'm quite happy that, and Mr. Guillemot is quite aware there's interest in this and will report back to council. I think that covers it. So if there's no one opposed to this, I will put the
Mr.
motion.
Mayor, I could just add that the community will certainly be informing us as and when.
I'm sure Mr. Quayle will. I will put that motion now. All those in favour, please, councillors. Thank you. That is unanimous. That's done. I'll now go to item 12.2 PS1, the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, Renewable Electricity Provision on page 63. Councillor Sargent, as Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This did not have a recommendation coming out of committee. It was pushed to this council meeting. You yourself, Mr. Mayor, sent all councillors an email the other day with a suggested recommendation. I think that pretty much makes it pretty succinct. Would you like me to read it out, or is it pretty clear on the board?
Yeah, if you can just read it out, that would be good, councillor.
The council endorses option 2, which delivers on the SEEP targets to 2030 and continues investment in the solar PV systems, and notes that the draft budget includes $600,000 in 2022-23 to achieve this.
Thank you. And it's seconded by Councillor Lagan. Is there anyone opposed to this?
Yeah, I've got a question, just a question.
Just a question, Councillor Lagan?
Yeah.
Yes, you're happy?
Items, so can I ask the question now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, just on the costing of the item where it says, notes the draft budget includes $600,000 in 2022-23 to achieve this, and there is it says continued investment in solar PV systems. Are all elected members aware that that continued investment would include the cost of the power upgrades for the main building and also the cost of the structures in car parks, and that would be additional to the 600,000?
Yeah, so I think it's clear, your comments at council meeting were taken on board, and I think one of the things I put with this was it is clear that they will not be in the first year. This is about us committing to this year, and the intent of council, and I think your debate last week also, councillor, was around making sure that the city's buildings, including this building, were the priority for that. So this isn't about putting money on next year's budget for car parks or anything like that.
Good, and I assume that any elected member could, after this year and this item being moved and the installation happening, there could be more discussion about some modification to the plan moving forward.
Yes, and I think that's the intent, is to council endorse the Sustainability Energy Action Plan targets towards 2030. How that is achieved over the coming years, I'm sure, will be an ongoing debate, as we saw on the weekend, a very topical one at the moment.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Thornton, do you have a question? Councillor Thornton, do you have a question?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just want some clarification on moving forward with budgeting for this option 2. So it states that there's $6 million going towards option 2. Does this recommendation change that?
So I'll get clarification. This recommendation is committing to the SEEP targets, and it's committing to this year's budget. It's not preempting what future budgets will be for this item. But certainly the total costings that were provided in the report to achieve that would be accurate. Does that answer?
So then my next question is, why is it still option 2? Why wouldn't it be another option? Because option 2 did commit that $6 million for the solar PV. I'm just a little bit confused there.
Sure. So this is part of an overall plan. So option 2 is the intent, but obviously council will need to revisit this, I would think, on an ongoing basis to determine if that changes in the future. Are you seeking something else? Are you seeking more clarity around committing to the $6 million?
Well, that's what I thought we were doing by that option 2.
All right, let's get some clarity.
In the table.
Mr. Chipper, if you could provide some.
Through the chair, option 2 was saying to install the SEEP solar program out to 2030. And what the alternative recommendation is saying is just instead of approving the budget in full for that whole 10 years is that council would be approving budgets annually and the city would be preparing them every year and presenting them to council. The alternative recommendation was the notice of motion by Councillor Thornton, which said to install the whole 10-year program by 2025.
Does that help you, Councillor Thornton, or would you like me to open debate on this?
Well,
Sorry, I've got a yes here. Councillor Reid would like to open debate. I think I'll come back to you in a minute if that's all right. I'll go to the mover to see if you'd like to open debate.
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor. We have a lot of conversation over the last year about our SEEP program, our SEEP targets. There's been a lot of robust conversations around council, and to be quite frank, Mr. Mayor, not all councillors agree on how to get to that target. And that was proven quite strongly at committee last week. All councillors, from what I can tell, believe in the target, but how we get there is a totally different kettle of fish. So what is being proposed tonight is let's get this year out of the way. We've got a budget item of $600,000. Let's start achieving those targets. Let's start getting solar panels on roofs, and council can have a dip at this every year up until 2030, and the city will bring us reports every year on what's going on. But I think that's also prudent. The election on the weekend brought in a government that might end up having a lot more green credentials than the previous one, which means the landscape is potentially changing and continuing to change. So this council projecting a 10-year spend might be a bit premature when we could possibly be accessing other money, other avenues that are down the track. So it's an uncertain landscape. So the recommendation on the board is let's get this year out of the way, let the officers come back to us and monitor that moving landscape, and perhaps our $6 million spend might not be as much going forward into the future. Who knows? And I think that's the point of the recommendation on the board. We don't know.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan, you seconded?
Yeah, look, I agree with Councillor Sargent's comments. The intent of the original recommendations is to provide the city and ratepayers with a visible SEEP with action into the future on reduction of power through fossil fuel generation, and the SEEP does support that, and we are looking at all options moving forward, but we are all aware that those options moving forward are changing rapidly and the space is changing rapidly. The notice of motion at committee last week talked about fitting out the city building, fitting out the depot, plus the cost of additional upgrades for the building, and making a start and showing that we do have a progressive mindset with regard to this. But also, I think this option we're looking at now allows us to do a check-in every year and see whether or not, for instance, battery technology has become more viable, whether or not the city could look at other options with carbon credits or trading. We also, I note today, a lot of elected members, or all elected members, received some information from a federal member, Stegel, today, that talked a little bit about credits. This is a changeable space, and a lot's happening in the space with wind, solar, and other energy mixes and other purchasing mixes as well. This is a great start. It gives us a start. It gets the SEEP moving in the direction that we want. We've included EV vehicles, and we've included reductions in our total fuel use. This is where we should be going, but I would concur with Councillor Sargent when he says it gives us a chance to have a look at in the future whether or not other options help us with the cost saving. There's no doubt solar will save us money over time, but the concern at committee was that a large upfront spend out to 2030 and then 2050 without looking at other options may not have been the best fit. This is a great start point, and we can work on the best fit as we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor. I know, just for clarity for the people at home, I'll let them know. So I've got Councillor Thornton next, I've got Councillor Reid, then I've got Councillor Migdale indicated. So Councillor Thornton next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I do concur with Councillor Sargent and also Councillor Lagan that technology does change and we should, look at this yearly, solar PV is a tried and tested technology. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's not going to be a stranded asset. And by proposing that we invest more in solar, we are able to own that asset, and we are able to also own our electricity and become more self-sufficient. If we go to 100%, for example, solar, 100% PPA agreement, that's going to cost us essentially, or our ratepayers essentially, $8 million more than just 100. Yeah, if a 100% PPA is going to cost us $8 million more if we don't implement a solar PV, program like we were proposing in option 2. Cities are responsible for 70% of carbon emissions worldwide, and the report in Deadline 2020 states that building scalable renewable energy is the highest impact action that cities can take in decarbonising our energy sector. Now, if we also take a look at I know that the City of Sydney's PPA agreement has been raised before, and they went with 100% PPA agreement. Now, their agreement is costing $60 million to the City of Sydney, and they're going to be saving their ratepayers are going to be saving $500,000 per year for the next 10 years. But if you have a look at what was proposed originally for option 2, we're proposing to outlay $6 million, and what we're saving our ratepayers in energy costs is about $440,000 a year. So in comparison, it's really quite a good technological option for us. I just think that it's a tried and tested technology. It's not going anywhere soon. It's the best thing that we can do. Yeah, I just think leaving it each year to decide. I mean, we know that solar's not going anywhere anytime soon. I just think that we should be investing and shoring up our energy savings for our ratepayers.
Thank you, Councillor. So Councillor Reid's next.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. I've been trying to get the council to do renewable energy for a long time, if we could find a motion to show that. But won't worry about that one. I just wonder whether or not it might, two things. One, this is community facilities, City of Stirling community facilities, not just one property. Could I just get that clarified? Because
Yes.
it does change.
Yes,
and
but I
want
think
that
after
quite
the
clear.
discussion, it was basically saying that they would prioritise obviously the admin centre and then move into community facilities. Yes.
I think that's really important, and I know the previous director wasn't really full of that to start with, but I think it's important that we show that the City of Stirling ratepayers that we're actually going to do the buildings across the city. Secondly, I would really like to have in that motion, if the move and the seconder agree, that we do get a concert, and I think it's really important that we go solar and renewable energy, and we have to do something. These buildings are costing a fortune to run, and unfortunately it does impact on the ratepayers. But whether or not we make it definitive and say that a report to be presented to council in, say, November every year, and it could be just tacked on to that if you like, because I really think it can't get lost in operational issues. It can't be lost in just maintenance. I really think if we're going to spend this amount of money and go in the future,
Yep.
I think we
let's
need
just
to
get clarification. I've got a feeling council will probably.
included.
Yep. I just think we've got to be careful not to be too prescriptive, because I'm guessing there'll probably be continual reporting on this. I might get Mr. Chipper or Mr. Kellick to provide some comment. but it may need to be even more frequent as things change and technologies change. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks through you, Mr. Mayor. The original intention of the motion at CRC was to report back in late 2024, towards the end of the initial tranche of work. But we can certainly report, maybe we can talk about the formality of reporting, but Mr. Chipper's team monitors this stuff on an ongoing basis, so we can provide information.
Maybe even
annually.
a report be presented to council each year prior to budget allocation or something, which
I think we need something. We need to know the value for money. Our ratepayers need to know. And plus, I think too, with technology changing, and yes, they did say 2024, which I think is too far, but I really believe we're going to spend millions of dollars. The ratepayers deserve to know what the money's going to, and also to show that we are being proactive and innovative. And they won't know that unless we have a report showing that. And even if the report just says that we haven't actually put all this in place, or like when we put the solar panels up here, people didn't know, unless they were coming on a dark night and saw the lightning hit it, but otherwise they wouldn't know.
I can see them from my office, councillor. They look good.
Lucky you,
They
have
look
a
good.
big office. Very good. But that's what I mean. So I think we're not coming back to the community to show what we're actually doing. And sometimes we're doing a plethora of things, but the basic things which means a lot to the ratepayers and shows that we're reducing costs, we're actually not selling the community. So whether or not, yes, a report presented to council.
So your point's taken. I'll just get Mr. Chipper. I can see he's chomping at the bit to say something, so we'll see.
Through the chair, yes, the city does provide detailed energy and emission outcomes in the annual report each year, and we talk about all the energy projects that have been implemented. But in addition to that, as part of the SEEP, we said that we would report back annually to council to update on the works and outcomes in more detail.
Yeah. Okay, and I think the point is taken, Councillor Ree, and this covers it. And by saying prior to budget allocation, it basically means that it's going to be prior to 12 months because we're doing it now and we're going through budget. And I think that's an appropriate time to get the report back anyway because it will have significant budget implications.
Yeah, I think that may address it, but I don't think that annual report, and it's a lovely report, but I think it needs to come to a council.
Yeah, and I think that's acknowledged. Yes. Yeah, they can both agree. Councillor Migdal, got you?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I won't take up too much time, but I will certainly reiterate and give my agreement with Councillor Lagan and Councillor Sargent. We have discussed this as a council robustly and consistently. I agree wholeheartedly with option 2. We need to be moving in the right direction. We have a new federal government stepping into bat who are all about it, and I'll be interested to see, and I'm certainly hoping to see some type of support. We are not the City of Sydney, and we do not earn the rates revenue that the City of Sydney earns, but I am hoping that both our state and federal governments, with their commitment to climate change, will step in and will give us their support so that we can then pass on these rate reductions and decrease these costs and pass that on to our residents. So I feel that this is the absolute best direction for us to head in, and I 100% support endorsing option 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Migdal. Can I also, just before I move on to Councillor Farrelly, just check, I don't know if I checked that Councillor Sargent and Lagan would accept that amendment. Councillor Sargent's all right. Councillor Lagan, you're happy with that?
I just had one addition. In that point 2, it says that a report be presented to council each year. What is the report going to say? Is it an update report, a progress report? It's a bit generic.
Yeah, and I think the intent is that it's a progress report on how it's doing and tracking against the targets.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, update that's fine.
Sure.
Happy with that.
Thank you. Councillor Farrelly, would you like to add something?
Look, I really want to ask a question first to either yourself in terms of option 2, because option 2 was for a period of 600,000 for 10 years. And the way that reads, and my apology, because I know I sort of didn't tick, is that it is only for 1 year, and then I presume it comes back.
So,
and then,
so
is that-
I can clarify that. So I don't think we need to get hung up on the fact council is basically endorsing option 2 and wants to deliver the SEEP targets. This year it's 600,000. What we don't want to do is say that just by doing option 2 you're tied in, because you could well by next year after this report want to double the commitment and move further forward. So whilst the intent of council is option 2, you could well move quicker than that if you wish.
Can we make that clear though?
It is clear.
You are
Yep,
clear
yep.
that that's what it says?
From this, we would expect that next year's budget would have a draft budget amount, would have the amount needed to achieve option 2. But with the report, that's where we want to give council the ability to either up it or take it away.
The only reason I ask, and it's because I heard Mr Chipper say, or someone, either yourself or Mr Killick, say about the 2024 was going to be the first trench of, where you've done the first whatever it is, the first project on it to get the, I just actually was listening then, which means if we're actually only making it to 23, are we not, that's not like a completion of that first set of the project?
No, I think you're agreeing. So this is still option 2. We're just noting that the draft budget includes 6,000. It's nothing about future budgets not including the money to do this. This council is committing to the Sustainable Energy Action Plan and option 2 currently. And it will be up to council next year to continue along that path.
Final question is, if we don't give some assurance that they can get through to the year 24 to do that first set of, what is it called, Mr Chipper?
I guarantee there is an assurance. This council, it's starting from the this will happen and council will have to take it away, but council can at any time determine through budget process not to allocate funds to something. But there is no intent of this council to stop the project before it happens.
Can I just ask, was 24, sorry, through you, Mr Chair, was 2024, like the completion of one large section of a project or part of a project? Is that possible?
Mr Chipper.
Through the chair, so the SEEP set targets for 100% renewable electricity provision and 70% emissions reduction by 2030. But there was also, council set a KPI for that at 2025 for us to reach 50% renewable electricity provision and 35% emissions reduction. So that's what we're working towards at the moment, as to make sure that we're on track. So that's where that 2024 date may have come in, where we would provide another update on how we would achieve the second part after the KPI was achieved at 2025. So the second 5-year part of the plan.
Right, so with that I'll go to Councillor Sargent to close debate. There's no other indication.
Just quickly, Mr Mayor, good debate everyone, thumbs up. This is all about what is the best cost for our ratepayers. That's essentially what this all comes down to. The city has basically said that it will need $6 million indicatively to get 100% energy renewal, 70% emissions reduction by 2030. The 2024 was just a KPI that was attached to the SEEP target to say, well, where are we at that point when we're looking at the SEEP program? So we're looking at what is the best fit going forward. And that could be anything. And Councillor Thornton's probably right. It probably is solar. And we probably will go down the path of solar for year on year on year. But let's get the ball rolling. the city has asked for $600,000. It's been in our budget this year for $600,000. It is expected that the city will come back next year and the year after and the year after with a fund, with an amount of money that puts them towards the goal of 2025 and 2030. So we're not ignoring SEEP. Like I said at the start, the councillors around the table agree with those targets. It's just how we get there is what there's a bit of argy-bargy on, if you will. But I think that by having a report come back each year on where we're at, what the plan is for the following year and how much the city needs, it's only prudent for a council to make those decisions on that day. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Mr.
Thanks. And with that, that closes debate. So it's moved. Councillor Sargent, seconded Councillor Lagan. And I'll just have a show of hands. All those in favour, please. Thanks, councillors. That is unanimous. I'll pass the thanks on to you, Mr. Chipper. I know you and your team have done a mountain of work on this and probably had some nervous waits through the process. So thank you. There is item 12.2T2, the Terry Tyzack Aquatic Centre, noting it was referred to council. So if it's all right with you, Chair, I'm happy to go straight to Councillor Sandri. Is that Councillor Sandri, your motion?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to put forward the officer's original recommendation on page 93, please. That the tender for Terry Tyzack Aquatic Centre redevelopment, outdoor pool and plant upgrades be accepted as detailed in confidential attachment 1.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Lagan.
Yep.
Is there anyone opposed to this? Yes, your question?
Given the comments from both the community and the councillors previously about the work that has not been done at the Aquatic Centre.
Yes.
We didn't actually get a report that I believe, even though that just touched on it, we didn't get a report really balancing out what money's been spent and what had been done as against what had, without going into detail. So my point.
Sure. So I can tell you. Offline, the ward councillors certainly have met with officers, and I've met just to pass on some of the concerns and questions. This is because it's reasonably time sensitive, being a tender, and it is a separate project. Was decided this is the best course of action, but with the commitment that the officers come back to council in the very near future and provide us with another update on what is happening and a bit of a briefing on what is happening and what the different parts of the program include and the current timeframe, given there is no federal funding, in the foreseeable future, but also a project update on the current project. So that'll come back to us shortly. No, it will just be a briefing for councillors. Sure.
Mr. Mayor, may I just make a comment, just so it's on the record?
Yes.
Thank you. Just in terms of this application, I note that committee last week, we sought a deferral to obtain some advice back, which I have. I would just like to put on the record that as part of the recommendation, there will be delegation, as I am aware, to the CEO to make amendments to the tender as required. And I would like the kids pool looked at as opposed to completely removed. And for a cost-benefit analysis to be undertaken by the officers with respect to that. And the other thing I'd like to just put on the record is the screening that is proposed between the pool and the indoor pool, that needs further refinement as far as I'm concerned. But
Sure. And that is noted, and we'll ensure that we have discussions regarding that. So if there's no one opposed to this, I will put this motion. Yes, you may.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you. Is this in regard to the discussion of the outdoor pool?
Yeah, so it's just,
and the renovation and all associated with that.
So this
outdoor
is
pool?
just accepting the tender.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we'll put that motion. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. And the last one, I think we've got 12.2 GOV1 review of delegated authority. It's been pulled out by Councillor Reid. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will move the recommendation from committee.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Proud. And against, Councillor Reid, or have you got a question? Against. Remove the delegations. Councillor Sargent.
I'll be brief, Mr. Mayor. The main... okay, so first up, the delegations that are being looked at by council this time round are pretty much exactly the same as they were last year, with a few minor amendments. So the main conversation that came out of committee last week was about the $750,000 delegation to the CEO. We did get some information through a memo from Mr. Blanchard, Miss Hawkins, I think it was, that did explain a little bit around when we approved the $750,000, which was actually last year. This is just a continuation of what that $750,000 delegation was, and around if any of those delegations were to come to council, we would have just had an increase of one tender. This is all just, the current delegations with the City of Stirling, in my opinion, are currently working and currently got the right balance between council and that delegations. So I'll leave it at that and I'll listen to what the debate is.
Councillor Proud. Thank you. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. I'm very concerned, like in the Banking Royal Commission and also from the Department of Local Government when they looked at some councils, where one of the comments made was the fact that there are too much delegation to the staff. Not that we don't love the staff. However, that the buck stops with us as councillors. When you're delegating a lot of stuff, you're delegating your power away and you're delegating the control of what the ratepayers do with their money, what we do with the ratepayers' money, well, what the staff do with the ratepayers' money. So we need to actually somehow bring that back, because otherwise you don't have any control. I find that particularly if we look at page 125, the increase to 750, which is one issue, but...
so just to clarify though,
page 129, sorry.
The increase was done last year.
I know, it doesn't make a grid.
Keep going.
Yes. The fact that it got increased last year, which I opposed, and even though we've only done one contract, that's not the point. The point is $750,000 is a lot of money to be delegated to the staff. And to me, we don't know what's going on until we read it in the paper. So I think we need to somehow come back and show that we are actually in charge of the City of Stirling ratepayers' money, and it does concern me. It also concerns me on page 125 when we talk about the consultants, the amount of money that we're allowing for the CEO or his delegation or anybody to have consultants. We're trying now, it's $150,000. We're trying to make sure that we don't have a big rate increase. We're trying really hard to work out what staff we need, we don't need. We're spending a fortune on electronics and RMS and God knows what else to make it more electronic, which therefore says that we should have reduction in staff, which it doesn't seem to do. And if we listen to Mr. Ellis, we've got 300 more, so that'll be an interesting little comment back. So I think the whole lot is, why are we doing these consultants? We're supposed to be pouring back on the consultants. We have so many great staff. We've got staff that do one thing that could be used in another thing. Staff would like to go from A, B to C within the organisation, which is half the greatness of being in a big city. I don't feel that we need all these consultants, and especially at the cost that they are. Plus, we have a lot of staff that leave the city and then we employ them back 3 times the amount as a consultant, which is interesting, for want of a better adjective. I just think that with these delegations, we're going too far. And if people in the community read this and say, who's running the city? Because it's definitely not councillors. You know, we've got to look at it from the bigger picture and make sure that we're the ones accountable. We're the ones that they elect. And so therefore we should be looking after their money more. There's too much in delegation here. A lot of delegation, yes, for, you know, dogs, cats, all sorts of other things, infringement notices, which is also an issue, but we won't go there on that one. But, you know, I think those sort of things, and sometimes you do, because they're really operational. But when you're looking at big projects, when you're looking at consultants, that's out of control. You could sit there and have 4 or 5 $750,000 projects. There goes the budget. But then we say, well, they've already committed because we gave delegation to the CEO to go and do it. So I think we need to come back, as the department have said, we need to come back to looking after what we're doing and doing it well. Because we're supposed to be elected by the community, listen to the community. And by delegating everything, this is why we have meetings for 5 minutes, if I don't come.
Thanks, Councillor. Look, all I can say is the delegations are in line with the current Local Government Act and the recommendations from the Minister. So I don't think there's anything untowards with any of those, the delegations. As for some of those others, there's other avenue to certainly get reporting back on consultants. That's more a management practice and a culture rather than delegation. But I think it is important to note a lot of those big delegations, they're not a CEO having the ability to just go and sign checks. All of those things are looked at through either the plans and frameworks that we approve or the budget items that we approve every year. So we do have delegated authority as a council before we pass on that. Councillor Farrelly?
To you, Mr Chair. In regard to the item on the delegation to 750,000, which is the contract one, and sorry, I'm just reading from here. But one of the questions I did ask as well was, in terms of a tender process where you have these, can be quite large tenders that end up delivering quite a lot of money to a particular, the winning tender, how does that come through with the 750,000? So you might have, a multitude of parts or whatever. But if it gets to 750,000 on the whole lot, you might find that there's... I just agree with Councillor Ree that I think that... I agree with her also because there's not clarity in what that really refers to. Is it just on a tender of a number, a whole array of things, or is it on a tender of a building project? Is it those sort of things? So maybe that I'll leave that for the moment because I'll just go through the three things. The 150,000 consultants, I have a concern if we don't have some idea of, maybe it's a because I know sometimes you want to running a organisation, might be necessary to employ a consultant quickly rather than be able to send it straight through the council, but I think there should be a council approval process. And in context, you then know what's going on, you can have a feedback to that process. The third one is actually close to my heart for the moment, but sorry, my little thing went off. It is in regard to the legal action, instruct legal action on page 131. Conditions of the cost of obtaining legal advice, with the exception of employee-related matters, exceeds 50,000 be referred to council for direction. Why wouldn't you also have elected members? Or is this in regard to just planning? No, it's local government as well. So where you are obtaining legal advice, but with the exception of employee, and I presume that means it doesn't matter how much the legal advice is, it is related back to council. I think we should have also, with the exception of employee and elected member related matters. That's the local government side, nothing to do with planning.
Sure. Mr Blanchard, are you able to provide some on that one?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As the delegation currently reads, any elected member matter where the cost was to exceed $50,000 will be reported to council. If we were to include elected members in that exception, it would mean that there would be an unlimited delegation on the amount that could be spent in relation to an elected member matter.
Through you, Mr Chair, can we have a list of those then? Because that sounds impossible. There can't be an unlimited amount of elected members who are subject to legal action, surely.
Sure. Yeah. No, we can certainly provide that. Provide it.
Can we actually know what's going on in terms of that? We know with staff, put the elected members on the same information scale. Now, you might say they don't want to know, but I think they would love to, council to know.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? If not, I will go to you, Councillor Sargent, to close debate.
I'm going to be...
I'm serious about this one.
Yeah, you sat down. If you haven't...
I thought you were... I'd like to put an amendment first of all, to the tender, what we mean by the approval of new contracts. This is a tender, or is it just a new contract for?
But the problem is, if you haven't got a, so councillor, what I'm worried about is we're going to try to do amendments on the fly here. Have you got amendments, or have you got other questions?
I have got one for the instruct legal action, which means the amendment is to include employee and elected member related matters.
Let me just get clarification. I will just say, I'm very conscious when we get to delegations of doing amendments on the fly where they could possibly be dealt with outside of this. Is there, Mr. Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
But these are fairly significant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I might not have been clear in my previous explanation. If the councillor amends that part of the delegation, it will achieve exactly the opposite of what she's intending to.
Yep. So my question is, are we better off? Is there a need to deal with this tonight, or is it better deferring it?
You can defer.
Can I suggest a councillor, if you finish your debate and we get a councillor to defer it? Councillor Sandri is moving to defer it to the next council meeting.
Motion.
Or next committee. And Councillor Hatton is seconding that. And that's a procedural, so I will put that. That way it can be dealt with, and we'll deal with. So vote. So it's just going to the next committee meeting, I think it was. Or next council meeting?
No, we've got P&D 7th June Council, 14th First Wake Council.
Yep. So those at home, is there a couple of you voting against this? Okay. And against? Okay, so that's what I thought. So Councillor Thornton, Olo and Councillor Franti, I need you to vote. So are we in favour of holding this over, please? That's it. Councillor Hatton, are you voting? Thank you. Okay. Councillor Proud? Okay. And against is Councillor Proud. So this will be held over. I think it's a much smarter way to do. Mr. Blanchard will make contact with those councillors and work through those issues. We're much better off everyone seeing what those potential changes are and understanding them. That's good. Yes. It's much more sensible, trust me. Councillor Sargent, now, would you like to move the balance of reports?
Had this whole reply for the last one. Anyway, moving on. It gives me great delight, Mr. Mayor, to move the balance of reports.
I'm glad you're delighted. Councillor Proud has seconded. I will put that. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Councillor Farrelly, were you?
Yeah, I just, sorry.
Thank you. That's right. And that is unanimous. Delightful, Councillor Sargent.
I'll find a different word next time.
Brings us to item 13.1. So the elected member and chief executive officer at attendance and events policy on page 141. We'll get the motion and then.
On page 145, it says the management should require the invitation of all elected members, which is what I said. This was a change agreed by officers shown in attachment 3. However, it says on the alternative, accept attachment 4, on the recommendation, accept attachment 2. So we made the changes in attachment 3, but attachment 3 doesn't get anywhere. I just didn't follow that. So changes are in 3. Recommendation is 2, alternative is 4, 1 missed out. What are we doing here? So we're not putting them on?
I haven't got it in front of me, so let's get Mr. Blanchard too.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were 2 documents presented to Council in relation to this report. One is the management practice, which is CEO executive team adoption, and the other is policy, which is for Council adoption. Councillor Ree made a good point in relation to the management practice, and so that has since been accepted by the CEO and executive team and updated, and is shown in attachment 3. It is attachment 4 that is now presented to Council for a decision tonight.
Thank you. And Councillor Migdal has a motion, which I'll get her to put up and read.
Wait. Just clarification on that. Why isn't Council approving that policy?
Let's get this motion up first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that Council adopts the amended elected members and chief executive officer attendance at events policy as shown in attachment 4.
Thank you. And a seconder for that? Councillor Proud. Is there anyone opposed? So Councillor Ree, you want clarification while we're not approving the management practice?
Because really the management practice on attachment 3 should actually be then transferred and incorporated in attachment 4 because they actually cross purposes. So why?
I would think if
you have
council,
one policy that
because
are
council
not
would normally
together?
adopt a policy, and it's up to the executive then to work out the management practice on implementing a policy. So that's not up to council to start to get down to that. That's operational.
Yeah, but if it's not in attachment 4, then even though they may agree on one little line on page 145 to say they do it, it doesn't say that you're going to do it. And it should be in, if it's a direction of council, then it should be in the policy of 4 to make sure that the staff know in 3. One would think that would be a logical thing.
I think. No, I don't think it is. But I'll get some clarification, Mr. Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ree made a suggestion in relation to a change to the management practice. We have incorporated that change into the management practice.
And the executive welcome you to come and sit with them and go through it each time, if you'd like. They'd love it, just to ensure it happens. All right, is there anyone opposed to this? If not, I will put this. All those in favour, please. Councillor Olo. Thank you. Councillor Kristovich, are you with us? Yep. Thank you. That is unanimous. Sorry, I miss you guys when you put it up early because I'm trying to do the screen as well. Item 14, notices of motion for consideration. I have nil. Item 15, questions by members of which due notice.
I've got one. I've got one.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was later on. Yep. Got you. I thought this was the one where we had the notices. You are correct. I will go to you to start. Councillor Proud.
Thank you. That a report be provided to council on opportunities and costs to install additional coloured lighting to the city's main building in order to celebrate significant events and occasions.
Oh, that's a good one. Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Kristovich.
That a report be presented to council outlining both the current approach and opportunities to improve how the city deals with dogs off leash within on-leash areas and dogs not under effective control, leading to attacks on people, other dogs and fauna.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other notice of motion? Councillor Farrelly.
Gosh, I've had that on. Through you, Mr. Chair, that the Scarborough Foreshore Beach Hub arrangements between Development WA and the proponent be made public and brought to council for finalisation, and that the city seek feedback from community for the two areas and present back to council prior to any further negotiations. Thank you.
Yes, that's clear. Is there any other council? No, I will move on then. 15 questions by members of which due notice. Councillor Ree, sorry I missed you.
No, well, you missed me. The staff missed me. Everybody missed me. I had...
Oh yes, we definitely miss you, Councillor Ree.
I know. I had questions on notice, or where'd they go? Questions on notice from last year, I think it was, that finally made it. I don't know whether questions have gone, answers have gone, but they didn't answer the questions that I asked for, number one. Number two, why aren't they in the minutes, the agenda?
I have no answer. We are unsure. We'll have to probably take that offline and follow up with you and ensure they're on the next agenda if they were there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it possible to ask what the question's related to?
Yeah, Councillor Reid, we haven't got a copy of those and we're not sure what they are. So let's follow up with you and ensure they're on the next one. Apologies. You're welcome. That brings us to item 17, which is matters behind closed doors. Due to technological requirements, a live stream of tonight's meeting will finish prior to the confidential item. This means we won't see the viewers at home again until the next council meeting. Please, can we get the confidential